We'll just have to see how long I can stretch my battery. Forgot my charger. It's in the far off land of my office. Okay, so let's talk about getting us to this next screen and giving ourselves information or whatever. All right, so we now know when we've won because we've been printing it out, right? But now we need to have the ability to get us to this next screen. So I'm going to go into our code here and we can turn this guy green. So now everything's green and we have a working application, blah, blah, blah. So we want to talk about this idea of something called an intent. All right, this is Android specific. So an intent is the intent to do something. Now for us initially, we intend to launch a different activity. There's lots of different things we can intend to do, but the one we really care about right now is getting to another screen. So we intend to launch another activity. So now what is an intent? An intent is, for us right now, I'm going to kind of talk about it in our context. An intent is going to be a destination activity along with a collection of something called extras. And this is effectively luggage for us to take things with us. If we need to get stuff from screen 1 to screen 2, we would use the extras to do this. So it's kind of like taking a bag on an airplane or something like that. We'll see this by example. All right, so anyways, the intent gets the intent holds on these two pieces of information, where we're going and what are we taking with us. And it takes us to another activity. So let's look at how we can make this work. So we'll go to our logic here inside of our main activity. Just double click it again. All right. So right now, when we check for winner, we're printing some stuff out, right? So instead of printing that stuff out, what we really want to do is we want to go to that next screen, showing that there's a winner. So we're going to create an intent, maybe called I. This is going to be a new intent. Now, when we create intents, we tell it a context as well as where we want to go. So the context is kind of what's going on around us right now. So our current context is this. And where we want to go in this case, I named my other thing winner activity. That's where I want to go, is winnerActivity.class. So I intend to leave here, where we are right now, this current context, and get to there. Start activity. So now it is one activity that knows how to start another activity. So I'm going to tell my current activity, which is this is my main activity, to start another activity. The activity we're going to start is I, the one associated with that intent that we just described. Now we haven't taken anything with us at this point. The bags are empty, but we have them. All right, we'll use them here in a second. All right, so now check for winner is going to say if we have 3 things in our third tower, let's go to that next screen. So go ahead and hit play here. What row? Doesn't like something in here. No, I think it doesn't like this having a capital letter. So the question is, can I change it in here? I think so. I think these all have to be lowercase. So I'll rename this guy to be winner, TOH. Then I changed it there. And I think it'll be happier again. All right, so we'll go ahead and play. Now we're here, takes us to our next screen. We're a big winner. We hit back. Notice we're right where we left off. So really what we want to do is once we've been declared the winner and we go back, well, we can hit reset if we want to reset it, but we really want to have the game automatically reset for us. All right, so this is where something called the activity lifecycle comes in. So we have various moments within an activity where we can do stuff. All right. So we've been exposed to onCreate. So onCreate, this guy gets called when it gets called right off the bat one time, right? So here's onCreate. So this callback gets called the very first time when an activity is first created. Now onStart, this is when an activity enters the started state. So if we talk about this on iOS side of things, to kind of compare them. So let's call this the view controller lifecycle. This is on iOS. So on this guy, we had view did load, and this is kind of like on create for us. We have view will appear / view did appear. So we have both of those on iOS, where we can do something immediately before the view actually shows up on the screen, and then also when the view actually has appeared on the screen. There's like a view will disappear, a view did disappear, some things like that. Couple other ones like that. So different moments in time when we can grab onto a particular event that's occurring as our activity or as our view controller is going through its various life cycle and do something in response. So for example, let's say in an application you have some animation that's going on the screen or something like that. Well, you probably don't want to waste a lot of CPU cycles on animations when the thing's not even being shown, right? So you want those animations to probably start when the app is on the screen and to stop when the app leaves the screen, to start up again later on. Make sense? So for Android, we have a similar activity lifecycle. So we've already seen onCreate, and we have this thing called onStart. And my understanding is that onStart is pretty similar to this view will appear, view did appear. It's kind of a combination of those two. It's when that activity actually has started, which I believe implies that it's either already on the screen or just about on the screen. One of the two. Come back in here. When the activity enters the started state, the system invokes this callback. This makes the activity visible to the user. This is as the activity prepares for the activity to enter the foreground and become interactive. So that kind of sounds like it's that view will appear or view did appear type thing. Okay, so that's when on start gets called. All right, so now notice that this on start only ever gets called one time. On iOS, view will appear and view did appear. They get called every single time a particular view is about to show up or did show up. On Android, this is split into on start. This is the first time it shows up. Let's just couple them together. And on resume is every other time it shows up. So we have two different life cycle things. What happens the first time it comes onto the screen, and then what happens each additional time it comes onto the screen. Make sense? So that's this on resume thing. So when the activity enters a resume state, it comes to the foreground and then the system invokes on resume. This is the state in which the app interacts with the user. Actually, I want to test something here real quick before I tell you more here. So let's go into main activity. And I'm just going to add some of these callbacks in here. Notice up top we already have one that was created for us on create. So let's go ahead and create on start. And I'm just going to print out as wrong language. So we'll print out on start. And then I'm going to go ahead and call on resume. And we're going to print out on resume. All right, let's go ahead and launch this right now. I want to know whether both of these get called the first time through, or is it just on start? That'll tell us exactly how to compare these to iOS development. All right, so app's definitely on the screen now. So let's go back here. Let's look at Android Monitor. And I see an on start. I also see an on resume. So that tells me this. View will appear is on start. View did appear is on resume. And let's go ahead and prove that. Actually, I don't think on start's going to show up again because that activity only starts once. So I might amend that even a little more. Let's prove that here. So I'm going to go ahead and win the game. All right, so now we're here. Now, I would expect when I hit back, I think I'm only going to see an on resume. I will not see an on start. I did see an on start. On start, on resume, on start, on resume. Okay. So with that in mind, I think this is a pretty accurate description. View will appear as the on start. That's certainly the guy we're seeing first, right? And view did appear as the on resume. All right, so that's on resume. On pause, system calls this method at the first indication that the user is leaving your activity. But it doesn't always mean that we're destroying it. So let's look at when that guy gets called. I'll go ahead and create the on pause guy here. Run this. All right, so the app is launched. We're on start, on resume. We're already there. All right, so now let's look down here. Notice that on pause has now hit because we are pausing that current activity. And similar to what they said in here, it isn't being destroyed. It's just not the top of the stack anymore, right? It's not the guy we see. Only the activity that's sitting at the top of the stack is the one that we see on the screen. So we've just slid another activity on top of the guy we're currently looking at. All right, so this guy has now paused. Stop, when your activity is no longer visible to the user, it has entered the stop state. So let's look at on stop, and then we're going to connect it to those. So on stop. Run this again. Let's see the order in which these hit. It's a good thing I've been thinking about going pro in Towers of Hanoi. Otherwise, it would take forever to solve these puzzles, right? So we hit on pause, then we hit on stop. So let's connect those in here. View will disappear. That's on pause. View did disappear. That's on stop. All right, these are just direct mappings to iOS versus Android. So on pause is when we're about to go away. On stop is when we did go away. On destroy, called before the activity is actually destroyed. So when we kill the activity, so let's just throw that guy in there for good measure. There's on destroy. There's that guy there. We'll relaunch it. Okay, we should have our on start, on resume. I've already hit. I'm going to come here. I'm going to hit the back arrow. On pause, on stop, on destroy. So I just killed the app, right? When might you want to do something on destroy? Well, I mean, at this point, we're using Android's interface. I mean, there was no time for prompting, right? When I hit that back arrow, we're gone. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. So we're out. Yeah, so something like that. So let's say that we are downloading something. You know, doesn't really necessarily play to our use cases for mobile phones. But let's just say it did. You're downloading some file in the app. Well, you might want to be able to pick up where you left off. So you might want to pause the download and then remember where you left off, like which byte number or something like that. You might want to do some quick housekeeping before the app finally dies. Does that make sense? So on destroy gives us that moment, You know, that's the point of these life cycles. We have these opportunities to jump in when different things have happened to do whatever. So maybe on pause is when we stop an animation. Or maybe on stop is when we stop the animation, so it's not using processing time. Maybe on start is when we start the animation back up, because that's immediately before it's actually shown up on the screen. Now, this might be imperceivable, especially with our modern phones that are pretty fast, but the idea is that once it's actually on the screen on resume, at that point, we know that it's there. And let's say you have an animation that takes us, let's just make it exaggerated. Let's say it takes the animation 2 seconds to start. Well, the screen shows up, you see nothing, 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 now it's animating. If you do it on start, it'll take a little bit longer for the screen to launch because the animation is starting. But then once the screen is up, the animation is already going. That makes sense? So these are our opportunities to interject stuff as part of that life cycle. All right, yeah, I don't want to do the activity for result thing right now. Okay, so we have different things that we can do here. Now, what we could do is we can say on start. So right now, what we're doing in here is we're resetting the game on create. Well, really, don't I want to reset the game every single time this activity starts? Whether I came to it at the beginning or I was on the winning screen and I came back, I want to reset the game. So I'm going to remove it from there. And I'll do it on start. That is before it's actually on the screen, but after it has begun cooking again. If I do it on resume, we probably won't notice because we're not talking about high-end graphics for moving those 3 text views around, but there might be a chance that we will see the 3 disks empty from the 3rd tower and load into the 1st tower. You might see a flicker of it, because that's going to happen fast. It's going to go down fast, but this will happen before we ever see it. So we'll reset the game on start. We saw that on start does get called the first time, so we go on create, on start, on resume, and then when we leave the app, we do on pause, on stop. When we come back, we never hit on create again because it's already been created. So we hit on start, then on resume. So if we put it inside of on start, we're guaranteed to reset the game every single time we come back to the screen. Now that might not be what we want. Okay, we'll look at an example of that here in a second. So let's go ahead and run this, and let's just make sure that this guy does what we intend for him to do this time through. All right, so I'll go ahead and win pro mode. So we won. Now I'll go ahead and hit back. Android has built-in back buttons, right? So I'll hit back. Now the hope is that on start, before we see it, it resets the game. So our game is reset. We're back to 0 moves, and we can go and play again. Make sense? Okay, so now, when might you not want it to necessarily reset the game when you resume? That's a true statement. That'll actually be an interesting thing to test. Let's see if it'll let us do that. So I'm going to hit, what's this guy? And what's this guy? Oh, so it's not even consistent across phones? Because you're an Android user, right? Of your iPhone? Because this is my first Android phone. And I've used them for a while, but on my phone, my home button looks like this guy. And on mine, the showing multiple apps buttons looks like 2 lines on top of each other. So this guy on mine is 2 lines on top of each other. This guy on mine is this guy. But at least they're positioned. Well, actually not. My back arrow is positioned here. And my multiple applications is positioned here. Nah, whatever. It's just a thing. All right, so let's see what has hit there. So we're in the background, on pause, on stop. Now let's go back to our application. There's on start, on resume. So let's make a couple of moves here. So we've definitely made a move. All right, so now we're going to go to home. Then we'll come back and our game is reset. So yeah, good answer. So if we actually leave the activity, we didn't kill the activity, we just left the activity to go do something else, multitasking or whatever. What about if we stay in the activity? Might there be like a help button or something like that that tells you kind of like, the rules, like how the rules work or something? It might take you to another screen that teaches you about the game. And then when you come back here, you don't want it to reset. You want to pick up where you left off. Okay, so really we need to have, we've seen how it can reset, but we want to be a little bit more explicit on whether we should reset or not. Make sense? All right, so really we only have a very specific circumstance that we wanted to reset, and that's after we've won. Do we always want it to reset after we've won? Yeah, well, it seems reasonable enough. After we've won, after we've actually won, maybe we want it to reset. So one thing we can do, so how would you suggest, based on what we know right now, how could we make it reset only after we've actually won? Add it to which method? Well, we already done that. Oh, okay. I think I see what you're saying. You want to go. Here's the check for winner. So maybe right after we start the activity, this dot reset game, and then take it out of on resume. Where do we do it? We do it on start. So don't just always do it on start. Do it when a game has actually been won. Well, it's going to be a timing thing, because when you here's our intent to go to the next screen. This is this current activity trying to go to the next screen. And going to a next screen on our mobile devices has like an animation associated with it, right? Things kind of slide in. So, but that animation is happening in its own thread. So, it's this guy, this line here would say it does not block. That is, we can get to this line while this line is still executing, because that animation might take a quarter of a second or something like that. So the question is will we see the game reset as we're leaving? The answer is possibly. So let's find out. It's not the end of the world if we do, but it's maybe a little bit, maybe not undesirable, something like that. Ruh-roh. Oh, we have a little issue. What's our issue? I removed it from on start. I don't even get a game now. we need to put it back and on create, so it at least happens once, right? Because we had it on start here, so now it's never happening. So we'll go ahead and throw that guy back in on create, just so the very first time we get a game to play. All right, now we have a game. So we'll go ahead. We saw it, right? Now, is that the end of the world? Yeah. Okay, I mean, I can tell you, based on international Towers of Hanoi championship rules, the game should not be restarted visually until you've seen the Kool-Aid Man. I mean, it's in the rule book. I don't make this stuff up. So not until you see the Kool-Aid Man is it allowed to be restarted. Okay, so functionally, this did what we wanted it to do, right? So now I go back and it has been restarted. I can now make a move. I can leave the app. I can come back to the app, and I can pick up where I left off. So functionally, it's doing what we wanted to do, just didn't quite pull it off the way we wanted to pull off. So what we need to do is we need a way of resetting the game at the moment when we were resetting it before, after things are not on the screen, when the user doesn't see it, but only situationally. We need a way of communicating with our app outside of the outside of this logic, because really the game we're playing right here, which you brought up when you suggested it, is a timing. This guy right here is a timing situation. How long does it take to start this activity? How long does it take that animation to go? We need that to not happen till after that. Make sense? Potentially. Yeah, I mean, that's a reasonable fix here. So if we're kind of playing the game, what she wants to do is she wants to say, well, let's reset it on that next activity. All right. So we'll come into our winner activity. And you could do it on start or even on create, right? All right. So you want to go ahead and reset it here? How? So my function lives inside of main activity. So I have a function called what? Reset, where did I put it here? Reset game. This is an instance method of main activity. So in order to talk to this guy, I need an instance of main activity. Do I have an instance of main activity here? Not obviously. Let's look. I can get the intent, how I got to where I am. Can I get the activity that called me? Here's get parent, which is an activity. And I happen to know that this guy is a main activity. So I can take that main activity and I can call I need to make this guy public, so I'm allowed to call it. So I need to call reset game. So there's my reset game. So this will only work if an activity knows about his parent when we launch it the way we launched it? Let's find out. So let's make sure we're not resetting it the way we did before. So we'll take it out of here. So now what's happening is on create, and actually, this would be interesting. Let's see if it works first. We might still see it because chances are these things are happening at the same time, right? So this guy the second screen might be being created. In fact, he's going to have to be created before we can leave this guy and come here. This will be interesting. But assuming this works, we're onto something good here. Not the direction I was going to go with this, but this will be an intermediate step, and I'll take it to the next level. All right, so we'll go ahead and, ruined my perfect score. Okay, so it does not know about the parent. So my feeling is that this thing here for get parent deals with another type of kind of like a fake activity called a fragment. So a fragment-based activity can know about the parent that houses him. And we're not going to talk about fragments, at least not right now. So this isn't the way I would have done it anyways, but that was possible, right? Decent thought. What does this mean to you? If I don't remember if we've talked about this or not. We've talked about MVC, right? MVC's model view controller. And that guy's a design pattern. Have we heard of a design pattern before called a singleton? Haven't mentioned it? Trying to think if I would have mentioned it in 535. It's possible I would have said it out loud in 535, but I doubt we used it. So just like all design patterns, a design pattern is a proposed good solution to a common problem, right? That's what design patterns are. So for Singleton, the idea is it's a good idea to put information that needs to be shared between more than one, and for us here, let's say more than, I'm probably going to say more than 2 activities in a single place. All right, and I've just inserted the word activity because we're dealing with Android stuff here, but at the end of the day, the idea of a singleton is if we have some element that we need to share between all of us, it's a good idea to keep it in one place so that we all can just come to that one place to share it. Make sense? All right, so we're gonna make a singleton here. We have to create that place. Now, most IDEs actually have a thing for adding a singleton. So if I go to File, New, they have a thing here for singleton. I rarely like using them. I like writing my own, kind of like homemade, right? I actually don't like the way their singletons end up looking. Let me just show you theirs real quick. So I'm going to create a singleton, and we're going to call it test singleton. Hit OK. Yes, we'll add it to our get whatever. So here's our test singleton. So it is a class. Yeah, but you're going to see that. So this guy has a private static final. So final means this guy only exists once. Variable called test singleton of type test singleton called R instance. And this is going to be a new test singleton. Then we have a get instance, a public function that allows us to get the instance of this guy. And then what we can do is we can put a bunch of public variables in here. So for example, let's say I want to know about my main activity. All right. And really, I named this guy poorly. Since it's a class, you probably want to start it with a capital letter. So let me actually just fix that while we're in here. So I'm going to right click on this guy. We're going to say refactor, then rename. I'm just going to put a capital T there. Refactoring is a software engineering term, so this changes the name of it throughout. All right, so I'm going to show you how theirs works, and I'll show you why mine's better. Theirs is actually better from a performance perspective. I'll explain it here in a second. So let's say that we want to know about that other activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a public main activity MA in here like that. Then what I'm going to do, so this is just this guy has the ability of holding a variable called MA, of type main activity called MA. If we were going to write this with good programming practice, we'd probably even make this private and then give ourselves a setter for it. But just so I can explain it, let's just keep it as a public variable so we can directly access it. So now inside of main activity, on create here, so when this main activity is being created, I'm going to go ahead and I want to say test singleton dot get instance dot MA is equal to this guy. Okay, so I'm talking to my singleton. I'm asking him, if we go back into our singleton here, do I have it up here? This guy's static, so he's owned by the class. He's final, that's what makes him faster. This guy only exists one time. And I'll talk more about that in a second. His variable type is test singleton. Its name is our instance, and it's going to be a brand new instance of this class. And then all the stuff in here is instance stuff. But in order to get this instance, we need to have a static function in here called getInstance that returns that instance. So I need to say test singleton dot getInstance, which then returns this static variable called our instance, which is an instance of test singleton. So that's what I did here. I said, test singleton, give me the instance that you created of yourself. Then set your variable ma equal to me, to this main activity. Then over here in winner activity, instead of this, that was strange. We'll say test singleton dot get instance dot ma dot reset game here. So when main activity was created, he preserved himself in the singleton. Then this guy can access that same singleton and retrieve it. So let's test this first, and we'll see if we actually notice the that timing thing. Go there to there. We did notice, did see it. So if we're going to fix that, and it worked, right? We saw it work. Now, what we could do, though, is we could come in here and say on resume. So that's when this screen's actually, this guy's on, right? That's when we could do this. We definitely won't see it now, right? Because on resume means that winner screen, I mean, like I said, international rule says you see the Kool-Aid man, then you can reset the game. This means we see the Kool-Aid man. So let's run it again. We'll see that we won't see it, but then I'll show you my version of a singleton. All right. We're back here. All right, so let me show you my version of a singleton. Now, it's not that this version of a singleton is horrible. It's just a little bit clunky, right? This guy here looks more intimidating than it needs to look. It's not hard once I've kind of explained it, but there's extra crap there that we don't really need. Wouldn't you agree? There seems to be some extra stuff. Let me show you my version. I like to call my singletons core. That's the variable name I usually choose for it. So I'm just going to come in here. I'm going to create a new Java class. Plain Jane Java class. And I'm going to name him core. Could have named him test singleton, except we already had a variable named that. So there's core. And inside here, I'm going to create a public static main activity ma. That's my entire singleton. Who wins? Simpler? Is this one simpler? One variable. And this guy is a class variable, because we have static in front. How do you call class variables? Using the name of the class in which the variable was defined. So this is core.mainActivity, or core.ma, rather. Core.ma. So where's my main activity? So right here, just so we can compare them side by side. This is my version of a singleton. This is their version of a singleton. Over in winner activity, this is their version. That's my version. You know what? It seems like you can still see it. Yeah. So I must have to do with the animation. All right. So we'll fix that here in a second. So definitely I guess you can choose, but doesn't that seem simpler? There likely is an imperceptible performance benefit because of the way final variables work. Final means it cannot be changed. So this probably gives you a little bit better performance. Nothing we're going to notice, ever. I couldn't even imagine a situation where you'd actually feel it. Maybe there's a little bit different memory footprint or how the memory is managed, because my version of a singleton completely relies on a global scope where there's just one in the Java runtime that you have access to everything. I'm just saying, I'll just throw it up there. To begin with, singletons are kind of the lazy man sharing program. Because we come back here, notice I've said needs to be shared between, I said more than 2 activities. You could say more than 1 activity. You could also say maybe more than 5 activities. It's like, at what point a few minutes ago I mentioned this idea of extras, right? I'm going to show you that here in a second. But this idea of extras kind of says, it might be better for me to, if I want to lend you the car keys, for me to walk over and just hand them to you. And then when you're done, you give them back or whatever. But that might be better than me saying, oh, I just left them on the table. Grab them when you need them. Now, if all 3 of you might need to borrow the car keys. Now, and let's assume when you grab the keys, you get a copy of them or something like that. It might be easier for me to say, yeah, I just left 3 copies here on the table. When you need it, come grab a key. Make sense? Instead of me having to pass you one, pass you one, pass you one. So that's putting extras, and we're going to see it in a second, versus singleton. Okay? So that's where this gets a little muddy. At what point does it make more sense for me to just hand it to the couple of activities that need the information versus store it in this global thing? Because using a singleton can become kind of addictive because it's very convenient, right? So all of a sudden you have this thing like, oh, well, any variable that I need to share anywhere in my entire application, I'll just throw up there. Next thing you know, you have this like crazy, scary singleton that has 4 million things in it, where you have to like start naming variables like very, very specific things because it's like related to, you might have an application that has 20 different screens in it, and they're all using one singleton. So you might have to start naming your variables in that singleton as like, such and such, main activity underscore number of moves, stuff like that. Get what I'm saying? So it can get out of hand pretty quickly if you're not like a good steward of your singletons. Okay. So let's go ahead and fix this guy for our last step here, because we did still see it move, right? So what I'm going to do now, with a couple of options here. I'm going to start off by saying, well, instead of doing this on resume, let's put it on pause. That's when this guy we're just the first step of us leaving, right? So on pause, when we're leaving the winner activity, we'll go ahead and reset the parent activity. The feeling is that parent activity is definitely in the background right now. Perfect record. All right, now when I leave, it's back. All right, so that looked pretty decent. All right, now an alternative to that, rather than talking to the activity directly, I might decide, oh, well, what if I just keep track of a variable like should reset? So inside of my core, maybe I create a public static Boolean should reset. And let's start this guy off at true first. And then what we'll do inside of main activity, we'll take out the reset game from onCreate. And then on start, we're going to ask a question. We're going to say, if core dot should reset, then this dot reset game core dot should reset is equal to false. Because we shouldn't reset now. This will keep the game from resetting if we leave here and then come back. Like go back out to another app or something like that. Because when we come back in, when it starts back up, it's going to say, oh, well, should I reset right now? No, because we set it to false. It'll leave it alone. But we're going to set core dot should reset in our winner logic. Check for winner. You can do it before or after, whatever. So we'll say core dot should reset is equal to true. We've had a winner, so that means the next time we start main activity, reset the board. And what does main activity say to do when we reset the board? Or at least on start. It says if we should reset, reset it, and then mark it as not resetting next time. So then over here in winner activity, we don't have to do any of this stuff. Winner activity is just a pretty face. shows the Kool-Aid guy. Main activity takes care of whether or not he resets or not. Let's go test this. Oh, lost. All right, so we'll just make one move. And then we'll bounce into a different activity. We'll come back. We don't want it to reset this time, and it won't. We're still good to go. I've actually, what is that? My reset button broke. That's disheartening. It said it couldn't find the listener. Okay. And we'll leave. We'll come back. Must have just been a weird state thing. All right, so we'll go ahead and win. Okay, but now we've marked it as should reset. So when we go back here on start, that guy resets. Even though it didn't reset under any of these other circumstances. If I came here, go back in here, didn't reset. All right, that makes sense? All right, so now let's look at extras. So let's say that on that second screen, the on winner screen, I want to know how many moves it took. Okay, so what I'm going to do here in my main activity, when we have a winner, which is when I start that activity, that intent, I want to add something to this intent. I'm going to say I dot put extra. The extra I'm going to put is number of moves. Let's call it that. You can name it whatever you want. That's the name of my variable. Okay, my name of my package. And then I'm going to attach to that an integer number of moves. These don't have to match. It just makes sense for them to match, right? So I'm going to pack in my bag inside of this little, so I'm going to pack in my suitcase inside of this bag that I've put a label on called number of moves, this value. Okay? Now that's going to travel along with me. So when I get over here on activity, winner activity, I can go ahead and say int number of moves is equal to this dot get intent dot get int extra. And the name of the extra is number of moves. Now, the int extra also allows me to pass in a default value in the event that it couldn't find it. Well, it doesn't allow me, it makes me. So when I'm trying to retrieve something from my suitcase, I'm looking for this package in my suitcase. If I don't find it, this dude will give me a -1 because I put a -1 in there. That's the default value I want you to hand me if I forgot it. Okay? But we know we packed it. So we know it's going to get this actual value here. So I'll just print out that value. So assuming we beat it in the lowest number of moves, when we get to winner activity, it should print out a 7, proving that we delivered that over to that second screen, but we didn't do it through the Singleton. Instead, we handed it directly to that winner activity. Make sense? So we'll come in here. I'm lost. Run it. All right, so we had a win. This guy should now have received that extra. And we should have printed it out right here. There's our 7, proving we received it. So last thing we probably should do is maybe put it on a label. Activity winner. So maybe put right underneath this guy some number of moves. Low power, how low? Can I do this last little part? Ruh-roh, maybe not. Oh, well, in any case, we know that we could set this label equal to something, right? And put that number in there. Okay. So let me then stop the recording here so we don't lose that.